Hey everybody, Father Warner, good morning from Hong Kong. Remember, I always record in the morning for the next day, so that's a good morning from me. It's still nice and chilly, and the weather outside is a bit frightful. Yeah, it's not snowing, but this morning it was almost, I think, 10 degrees again. The readings for the fourth Sunday in Advent, I'm going to focus on the first reading today because yesterday the gospel was the same. So the first reading is from Micah chapter 5 verses 2 to 5a, and the gospel which we did yesterday was Luke chapter 1 verse 39 to 45. Now I want to begin this teaching by saying that, very often in life there are many of us who feel extremely insignificant. Everyone today is vying to be Mr. Popular, the heart of a party. And many of us also, as a consequence, feel so insignificant that we begin to suffer from a lack of confidence. We have extremely low self-esteem. I grew up, ironically, or strangely as you might think, with very low self-esteem. I've shared this before. By nature, I'm an introvert. By the fact of the priesthood, I find myself pushed into the limelight in front of a camera. Ask me to stay at home in front of a television on even Christmas Day and eat some Chinese food. I'll be the happiest person if I don't have to interact with anybody. So a lot of you, and as I do, may also suffer from a sense of being low self-esteem, or even worse, feeling insignificant. That is, I think, even more dangerous, that you feel nobody really cares. So if that's what you feel, you need to listen to this teaching. Because I want to say this, that small wonders often happen in the most insignificant places, or to the most insignificant people, or to people who think that they are insignificant. Because remember, God does not make junk. He has made us in His image and likeness. So we are not insignificant in God's eyes, but we begin to believe this. Small wonders happen to insignificant people. Let's look at the Bible, for example. David was the last of his brothers, the least of his brothers. Who did God pick? The least, the last, the lost. David. Look at Luke chapter 19. You've got Zacchaeus. He's a tax collector. He's a sinner. He's up a sycamore tree just with a lot of curiosity. Whose house does Jesus pick to have a meal? Zacchaeus. Insignificant. Jeremiah, the prophet, my favorite prophet. Stammerer like Moses, stutterer like Moses also. Just a youth. Who did God pick to be one of the greatest prophets? Jeremiah. I said small wonders also happen in insignificant places. Where do you think the Savior would be born? If you ask me, and here's an Indian reference, you would expect, if you're from the city of Bombay, the Savior to be born in Colaba. It's what we call Sobo, south of Bombay, the South Bombay. It's buzzing, it's where all the hip and the happening people, at least at one time, I think, resided. So God, you would think, would be born in Colaba, not in Katemanavali. You would say, like, where is Katemanavali? Or for that matter, you'd expect the Savior to be born, if it was in India, in Delhi, not in Dhobi Talao, And I'm sure whichever part of the world you come from, you have your own insignificant places. Yet, as I said, small wonders happen to insignificant people and in insignificant places. Why? Because very often we associate, big towns with having opportunities, with being centers of power, with being influence. And we think that's where the action takes place, not for God. Because God chooses the insignificant. I mean, look through the Bible. He's always chosen insignificant people, or rather what the world considers insignificant people and places. Now, imagine the prophet Micah. 700 years ago, when he made this prophecy, everyone must have been amazed. Why? I'm sure somebody pulled out a map when he said, "Oh, you Bethlehem, from you will come, the Savior." they must have pulled out a map and said, where is Bethlehem? Like, it's 5 miles southwest of Jerusalem. They would have thought, why not Jerusalem? Jerusalem is the place where the Savior should have been born. And if you read the prophet Joshua, or if you read the book of Joshua, chapter 15, or Nehemiah, chapter 11, you will find in both these chapters, in both these books, a listing of all the cities which were mentioned. Bethlehem was not mentioned. Bethlehem was so insignificant that it didn't have its own military commander. So you'd almost think, well, Bethlehem was on the wrong side of the tracks, But that's where God looks, on the wrong side of the tracks, or what the world thinks is the wrong side of the tracks. And Bethlehem, in that sense, was the town of King David. In this place where the world thought was the wrong side of the tracks, in Bethlehem, the Savior of the world was born. Now, when this prophecy was made, when Micah made this prophecy 700 years ago, it was a very tumultuous time. We know that at this point of time when Micah prophesied, somewhere between the late 8th century and the early 7th century, between 759 BC and 687 BC, you had King Jotham, you had King Ahaz, you had King Hezekiah. He was the last of the kings. And these were very fallible kings. These, along with a long line of kings, were extremely fallible. In fact, the entire lineage of King David had become a major disappointment, with one king after the other failing the people. Yes, Hezekiah was better than his father Ahaz, but on the whole, the lineage of David looked extremely disappointing. Now, economically, the southern kingdom was booming. And this is always a danger. When you think my economy is well, everything is well, because money is flowing. They had just moved from a barter system where you trade goods for goods to a mercantile system where you trade goods for money. Politically, it was a terrible time. From what I've taught you before, the Assyrians had begun to invade from the north. We know that Samaria in the northern kingdom, the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, Samaria, had already fallen in the year 722 BC. And there was a significant military threat to the southern kingdom. We know that the Assyrian king Sennacherib in the year 701 BC attacked Jerusalem, laid siege to it. Of course, God intervened, and the enemy was pushed back. You can read it in Micah chapter 1, verse 10 to 15, or 2 Kings chapter 18 and 19. So we've seen the kings, we've seen politically, we've seen it economically, but Micah also talks about what was happening socially. And you need to read the first 4 chapters before you settle on to the great prophecy of the birth of Jesus in chapter 5. What does Micah tell us? He says socially, it had become an extremely corrupt society. And I'm going to go through this list, and you're going to say, oh, well, nothing's really changed. So socially, it was corrupt. Hypocrisy was rampant. We are told that the rulers gave bad judgments, or gave judgments for bribes. The priests began to teach for a price. The prophets gave oracles for money. And here's the ironic thing, that the people think all's well in paradise, because if you read Micah chapter 3, verse 11, they say, the Lord is with us, no harm shall come upon us. And then you have the prophecy of Micah 5, because you would expect God to say, hey, you've got this all wrong. I'm going to rain fire and brimstone. You think I'm with you? I'm going to rain fire and brimstone upon you. But that's not what God does. In Micah chapter 5, the text that we read, verses 1 to 4, God says, look, you may not have been faithful, but I'm going to keep my covenant, because I made a promise to David. And as I've often said, God keeps his promise. But God is going to keep his promise in an unexpected way, and therefore a new leader. And that's why Micah talks about this new shepherd that's going to come. You, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, the least of the clans of Judah, out of you will be born for me the one who is to rule over Israel. And let me read this. He will stand and feed his flock. With the power of the Lord, with the majesty of the name of his God, they will live secure. For from then on, he will extend his power to the ends of the world, and he himself will be our peace. This unexpected new leader from an unexpected place, from obscure Bethlehem. So what can we learn on the fourth Sunday of Advent? The first learning that I'd like to share with you is simply this, that God delights in upsetting human expectations. Yeah? You think this chap is called, God calls just the other one that you thought was a loser. Yeah? All those who think you are losers, insignificant, low self-esteem, guess what? Stand in line. This is the march of the unqualified. Yeah? It's the march of the unqualified. So Sarah and Abraham ruled out. Boom, God says, from you will come generations as many as the stars in the sky. David was ruled out. Boom, God picks him. The gospel of today, Mary and Elizabeth, who are they? Nobody is. I mean, John the Baptist, who was he? We know that Caesar Augustus was the emperor of the world. We know Pilate was the ruler of Judea. We know Caiaphas and Annas were chief priests. And whom did God choose? John, son of Zechariah from the desert. Mary and Elizabeth, who were they? God delights in upsetting human expectations. Yeah. So if you think that you're going to be the next candidate for I don't know what, God delights in upsetting. The second, God does not always enter perfection. If your Christmas is a bit of a mess, I was saying to myself yesterday, I'm in Hong Kong. Are there any Christmas decorations around me? No. I'm a Christmas junkie. I would normally have my house all decorated. Yeah? Does it look perfect? No, and that's not any criticism to my host. But does it look perfect the way I would like it? No. But God does not always enter perfection. So if you find yourself this Christmas feeling, well, things are not perfect, it's not the way it should be, it just might be your best Christmas. And finally, if you think you're insignificant, you're just the perfect candidate for Christmas. Have a good day, everybody. I'll see you again tomorrow. Don't forget, you've got to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to this channel if you haven't, if you're a new listener, and do leave your comments. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the day.